Welcome to cooking cheap, easy, and tasty meals. Okay, today I'm going to make a buttermilk sandwich bread. It'll be an American white loaf, but it's going to have a little tang from the buttermilk. Now, we start off with buttermilk. Good start. 1 cup at about 110 degrees. And all I did was put it in the microwave and watch it. It took about 40-45 seconds to get it from the refrigerator temperature to that. Then we're going to add 1/3 cup of water, which is also at about the same temperature. We're going to add to that some melted butter. It's almost melted all the way. It'll melt the rest of the way once I put it in. And we're going to put in 3 tablespoons of honey. Now, I sprayed my tablespoon measure with a little oil so that it won't stick as much. And it tends to come almost completely out when you do that. Not quite, but almost. So there's 3 tablespoons of honey. Now we're going to whisk those together and put them aside. It's easier to hold like this, isn't it? Okay, now I'm going to just put that aside. We warmed it up to help the yeast when we put the yeast in. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we are going to get our flour and our other dry ingredients. And that's flour, yeast, salt. There goes 3½ cups. I'm just going to use all-purpose flour. Basically what I do when I do this is I scoop it and then I scrape the top off. So I don't weigh it. I'm not being that specific. 3. And this is 7. So that's 3½ cups of flour. I feel sure you could use bread flour if you wanted to, but I am not going to. Now the beeper you heard going off is I set my oven to 200 and let it heat up and then let it go for about 10 minutes. And then I turned it off because I want to let my bread rise in the oven, so I've got to let it cool a little bit. Okay, the next thing we're going to do, we're going to add salt. We're going to add 2 teaspoons of salt. 2 teaspoons. Now some people freak out when you put salt into a mixture and then you add the yeast, but it's really not that big a deal when you mix it up. We're going to use 2¼ teaspoons of yeast. This yeast has been around for a while. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 4 halves and 1/4. So that's going to give us all the yeast we need. Now I keep my yeast in the refrigerator, and that seems to have kept it good for quite a while. If you're uncomfortable with your yeast, you could test it by putting it into the water mixture and see how it does. But I usually just use it and take the consequences. But generally, I have not had a problem with yeast because my yeast doesn't sit around for that long and I use it fairly quickly. Okay, now I'm going to whisk these together so that the yeast and the salt is distributed and also the flour is mixed together. Now, if you have a stand mixer, this would be easier. I'm not going to use a stand mixer. I'm going to use a hand mixer that has kneading hooks, and I'm going to use that to do the initial mixture of this. Now, a stand mixer is convenient because you could just set it and let it go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in here. And I'm going to turn this on low and start kneading it. Now you could do all this by hand. You could stir this up and then put it out on the board and hand knead it. Or you could probably use less yeast and room temperature liquids and put it aside and let it sit for 8 or 10 hours and get the same results. So it probably would work as a no knead or a hand kneaded, but I'm just going to use this to get it started. Now, I want to turn this over and make sure it's getting all the stuff at the bottom. Does seem to be doing a good job of getting the flour off the bottom, so that's good. So I'm going to put this aside. Well, I guess I'll do it the old-fashioned way. My hands are clean. Kneading helps the gluten form. That's why you can use mechanical action to help the gluten form. You can use the kneading hooks, or you can hand knead it. That folding and mixing it like that helps the gluten form. The other way, of course, is to, in a no-knead bread, what you do is you give it hours and hours to form on its own. So you can do several different ways of getting the gluten to build up in the dough. And you see this is getting pretty sturdy. Okay, I'm going to increase this. I'm pretty satisfied that's ready for the next stage. You could do a little more. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is put a little flour down and actually do a little hand kneading. You can do this by hand, or you can use the tools to do it, but it all works out about the same. The idea is you keep rolling it around. Now, there's other techniques. There's the slap technique, where you slap the bread down on the thing, which works pretty well too. A bread scraper is a great tool to have, or a dough scraper, whatever you want to call this. Really makes this process a lot easier because it picks it up off the board pretty easy. Now what's supposed to happen is, as I do this, is this is going to get smoother, and you can see it really is getting that way already. And so what we're going to do is let it sit for a minute, and we're going to put it in the bowl and let it rise. Now I'm going to oil my bowl lightly. And I'm going to pick this up. I need to put a little flour in my hands to do this. Well, there, we got it pretty good without that. All right, now, put that aside. Now, we're going to put some plastic wrap over this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little oil on top of this, just so the plastic wrap won't stick as this expands. One thing I've learned about plastic wrap is you really need to get it close to what you're going to cover, because otherwise you have problems. So it sticks together really quickly. So that's what I'm doing. I've got it right next to it. It works better this way. And I'm going to stick it in my oven, which is cooler now, and let it sit for 30 or 40 minutes, maybe a little longer. Let it sit till it doubles in size, and then we'll get back to it. Okay, it took a little longer than I'd planned, but it's been about 2 hours, and it has finally risen and doubled in size. It's just a little cooler. So I am going to put some flour down, and we're going to get it ready to put into the loaf pan. I prepared a loaf pan by spraying it with a little oil and putting half a sheet of parchment paper in it. When you use parchment, if you're having trouble with it, crumple it and then put it in, and it'll be easier to lay it out. Parchment doesn't fold well, so that makes it easier. You also can soak it in water. It's another thing that works pretty well. All right, so we got this out. Okay, I'm gonna take the cling wrap off, and I am going to dump this out. Okay, there we go. Put a little flour on top. Now the general idea is we're going to try and get this into kind of a rectangle about the length of the pan. So, let's see. Let's do it. It'd be easier to tell this way. All right, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll it. I'll move this out of the way for temporarily. I'm going to roll it like this. Try and get it consistent. And we'll pick it up and drop it in here. And try and get it to lay down. Now, what we're going to do is cover it and let it rise for another 30 minutes or so. Just give it one more rise. So I'm just use the same cling wrap and put it over here. Just put it to the side and let it rise just at room temperature for about half an hour. Okay, put a pan in the bottom rack of the oven and put about 2 cups of water in it. That should be about right. Maybe a little more. Okay, it's risen. It could rise a little bit more, but I think I'm satisfied with that. So I'm going to put it in the oven. Okay, this is the bread after slightly less than 55 minutes. I checked the temperature in several places, and every place that I checked, it's over 195 degrees. That should be enough for it to be ready. I'm going to lift it out and let it cool. Watch out for the pan, it's extremely hot. It seems to be done, so I'm going to let it cool now, and we will try it once it's cooled. Okay, here is our loaf. It's a nice looking little loaf of bread. Let's give it a cut and take a look inside and see what we got. Oh, it cuts nice. Okay, take a look at the crumb. It's a nice looking bread, soft. Looks really good. Let's take a taste and see what we think. Nice crust. Soft inside, crunchy outside. It's a really nice loaf of bread. It'll be really good with sandwiches. It's got a richness to it from the buttermilk. It cuts well too. If If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and give us a like. Thank you.